Phoenix Gould is a CTI and ICF certified professional, personal, and executive coach. She leverages years of learning from the best coaches and decades of training as a professional dancer to help her clients develop deep emotional intelligence, courageous authenticity, and a core that can't be shaken. Phoenix has guided both teams and individuals in achieving their vision. And she is especially skilled when it comes to stage presence, self-mastery, and radical self-love. And today on the Power to Pivot podcast, Phoenix is here with me to talk about her business, her journey, and the concept of radical self-love, which I think is something that we don't talk about nearly enough. It is so important. You've heard us dive a little bit into it in the past here on the podcast and on social media. But I really think it's important for us to continue to talk about it, call attention to it. And then so I'm so excited to share this conversation with Phoenix. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hey guys, thanks so much for joining me for another episode of the Power to Pivot podcast. I am here with Phoenix Gould, certified professional, personal, and development coach. Phoenix, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you. You have such a unique and interesting background. You did not start as a coach, right? You were a professional dancer.
That's correct. I
How did
danced for my whole
you
life.
how did you get to this point where you're a coach and a speaker?
Oh, yeah, that is an interesting question. I was a dancer my whole life. I started dancing when I was 3 years old, and it was such a big passion. I could not imagine that there could be anything else in my life that I could be so passionate about. And then when I was 23 years old and I lived in New York City, studying dance and dancing on stage, I noticed that I was struggling on a social level. I had a really hard time connecting with other people, and so I went on a journey of self-development, finding out who I was and changing, transforming. And that journey was really, really long. It's taken me about 25 years. It's now almost 26 years that I started on this journey. And it was about 3 years ago that I felt a part of my life had come to a close. Something happened in my life when I had to make a really tough decision around my family. And I felt that a journey of self-healing had ended. I'd come to a point where the part of my life was complete. It felt like, okay, so the first part of my life was all about me, and now what? Mm-hmm. And I felt I had a choice. I had a choice to either go find something else that I wanted to do, or to give it up to spirit, to the universe. Mm-hmm. And get into something that I felt that I was meant to do, that I came here to do. Mm-hmm. And I often go to the end of my life when I have to make decisions, imagining that I'm a really old woman looking back on my life. And I was wondering when I would feel the most satisfied. And I realized that if I hadn't given over to the universe and said, okay, you take care now, like, what is it you want me to do? Where can I serve? That I would be regretting it as an old woman, that I hadn't taken that path. And so in that moment, I decided to say, okay, it's up to you. Give me a sign.
Total surrender then.
Total surrender.
What was that like? Because I feel like I've been in a similar situation, and we talk about the power to pivot on the podcast, right? And it's those moments where we're forced to make the choice, stay on the path or make a change. And I know that day for me when I got that call and I heard, this is where you pivot, and I knew I had to kind of take a step back and look and make a new choice. You're not always sure. Well, you're never sure where that's coming from or where that's going to lead you. Having been where you were previously, like, how did that surrender moment go for you? And because I know for me, surrender was not easy. It took me a long time, and I thought I had surrendered, and then I didn't really surrender. And then there was a point eventually where I knew. I was like, all right, this is it. Tell me about that moment for you, or what that what surrender looked like or felt like, more importantly.
Well, making the choice was really powerful. It really felt it was coming from my soul. It felt really strong, and I was excited. And the hard part was to continue to surrender because I didn't get a message coming through. There was nothing coming that made it clear for me. It didn't point me any way. So 3, 4, 5 months, I was just in a mode of waiting. And that's really hard when we don't know, isn't it? Like we're in limbo, like we're ready to take charge. We're ready to do something. We want to know what is the purpose now.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't sense anything coming through except for keep waiting. It's been set up. Keep waiting. It's coming. Keep waiting. And so that was the hardest part, is to continue to surrender again and again, and not knowing how long I would have to wait.
Mm-hmm.
And not knowing whether I was really listening all the way. Was the message there, and I just couldn't see it. And where would it show up? It was just a constant state of opening and readiness. Mm-hmm.
Were you ever afraid? Like
Yes.
really, it's scary, right? Why do you think it's so hard? We make it so hard for ourselves, because I think we do want to control, at least I wanted to control so much. And I had to kind of come to terms with myself that I'm not the one in the driver's seat here. I'm just kind of the vessel for how things unfold. But that's not logically, that's not really how we're programmed. So did you find similar, or was it different?
No, it's hard. There was, of course, fear. My fear was, what if I'm waiting and nothing ever shows up? What if this was it and there's not supposed to be anything else? Or what if I'm asked to do something that's going to be really, really hard? And what if it's something I don't enjoy?
Yeah.
As if that's
Right.
not going to happen. But there are all these fears that are coming up. Oh, yeah, I went through fear for sure. And then what I do is, when a fear comes up, I face it. It's part of the radical self-love that we want to talk about today a little later. The part of it is embracing all the parts of us that show up. And when fear shows up, I then decided to embrace it.
I love
Look
that.
at it, face it, not run away, but have a conversation with the fear so I could be freed again. But yeah, I would come up again and again, and I'd have to do the work of facing it again and surrendering again, checking in again. Do I really want to wait? Am I really this open? Right? It's just, I guess it allowed me to become more and more clear that yes, what I want is to be open. I want to be guided now. So go ahead, say something.
Were
Tell me
you
where to go.
were you always intuitive? Because I feel like you had gotten to a point where you were able to trust, you knew there was something else, you felt that ending of a period of your life where you were getting that call to surrender. That doesn't come easily, as we've already said, but like, were you always open to that intuition? Because I feel like to get to that point where there's something else and you're ready to find that purpose, you've kind of gotten some downloads already from the universe. So what was that like, and how did you come to really trust that intuition?
I've tried to answer that question for myself too, and I'm not quite sure when it started, but I think it's always been there.
Mm-hmm.
Ever since I was a little girl. When I moved to New York City, it was the same thing. I just knew I needed to go. There was a call. I had no idea why, but I knew I needed to go, and so I did. And there were many moments in my life where I just knew, and people called me stubborn because I couldn't explain why, and I was very clear. This is what I'm going to do, and nothing could persuade me to do otherwise. And I know now that stubbornness, when it sets in, it's because I know.
Yeah.
I've always trusted it. It's like it always pulled me. I could never resist it. I could never resist it.
I love that. I think that's so amazing that you were able to just innately know, like your intuition was so on fire that it didn't really matter. Like you just knew you were headed down this path and you trusted it and didn't let it stop you when other people said, like, you're not, what are you doing, because we get that, right? It's that you're crazy and this, no, it's not going to work. So I certainly appreciate it. I want to talk about radical self-love though, because this is so important. Understanding what self-love means, the concept of radical self-love, is it different? How is it different? So tell me about it.
Radical self love is not just, you know, a, taking care of, getting the right nutrition or the bath. For me, radical self love is unconditionally loving and welcoming all the parts of us,
Mm-hmm.
which includes jealousy, shame, fear, anger, feelings of revenge, um, passion, and not just the negative parts, but those are usually the hardest one for us to embrace, right? We have a great disliking to feeling all those emotions that we deem negative.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's actually embracing both, because for some people it's really hard to embrace pride, pride in themselves, pride of accomplishments, or the power that they have. So it's embracing all parts of us,
The good, the bad, the not so nice, the things we don't want
the
other
good,
people to see.
the
And
good, the bad, and the ugly. And actually that frees us. It really frees us. I've been on a lifelong search for authenticity,
Mhm.
really lifelong. And once I came across radical self-love, it was just like, oh my god, here it is, like all in one package. How amazing. um, when I found in my experience, when we embrace those things we find hard to embrace, it brings us to a place where we get freed from trying to be perfect. That's one of the things that I've realized, is that, again, you had to make a choice. I was put in this place where it was very clear for me. I had to make a choice between trying to be perfect and being whole.
Mhm.
And I chose to be whole, um, while embracing that a part of me still wants to be perfect. So the lovely thing about radical self-love is we don't have to deny any of our parts. We don't have to turn away from any part of us.
That is important for sure, because you don't want to admit that you're not perfect. You don't want other people to see that you're not perfect. And we fight that so hard sometimes. And it's not easy to let that go.
No, it's not. It's not. And the beautiful thing is that now we don't have to fight anything anymore. Like in radical self-love, there is no fighting necessary anymore. Do you know how we want to be confident, and there's that part of us that feels still puny and
Mhm.
little, and we are so trying to fight that part because we want to stand in the confidence. But with radical self-love, we get to embrace the part that still feels lonely and small and puny, and we get to embrace the part that wants to be confident.
How do you, really briefly, like, work with a client going through that transformation? And let's say it is confidence. How do you come to embrace those parts that feel so small? Like, is it, I imagine, and I'll talk to like my inner child, and talk to my little self, and we go through this process, and it's kind of like reprogramming almost. But is it a similar process for you? Do you have like a step by step, really quick guide, that what would we expect from this
Yes.
process?
Well, I just recently started teaching radical self love workshops, by the way, which, if people are interested, they can go to my website and sign up, where I teach the process step by step. When I have a client, I do regular life coaching, which is where I'm listening with elephant ears for anything that's going on. And I hear when there's a part that hasn't been embraced.
Mm-hmm.
I hear it. And and maybe I can tell it to you in a little bit of roundabout way with a story. How about this? We start with a
Yeah,
story.
sure.
Okay. So, um, if we imagine ourselves walking through life, we have been told certain things are not okay. You know, you shouldn't be jealous. Oh, that's ugly. Or no, you shouldn't be angry right now. So when we hear that, and we want to be perfect so that we can be loved, because that's what we believe to be true, we kind of separate those parts from us. Now they don't belong to us anymore. It's kind of like we're cutting them out of our being. You know, okay, now anger isn't part of me anymore, and we leave it behind. It's kind of like a shadow. It's like we cut it off, and there's this shadow of fear, anger, shame, jealousy, whatever that may be, that we feel is not right to feel or think. And now we're walking down the road of life, and these little bits and pieces still follow us as shadows. Because they are a part of us. They cannot go away. No matter what we do, they will never go away. They're bound to follow us, because I believe that is one of the truths of life. We cannot. They are a part of us. And whether we see them or not, those shadows follow us. And because we don't see them, because we don't want to see them, now they get to direct where we go and how we react. Because we always want to stay turned away from them. So we will always go in the direction that is away from whatever that shadow is that I don't want to feel right now. So they're taking over, and they can become very powerful in having us react to things that trigger that part in us. And so in radical self-love, we get to realize that no matter how hard we run, we will never get away from them. They are a part of us. And to be whole, what we need to do is stop running, turn around, and face those shadows, and welcome them back home. So what I do in my workshops and with the clients, I lead people through a process of stopping, turning around, seeing what's there, and then calling those pieces back in and developing a kind of a conversation, a kind of a relationship, much like you would with an inner child. With your inner child, we see these as parts of us, and we create an empathy for that part, an understanding of why it feels this way, kind of like you would treat a little child. You know, you would say, oh, of course you're sad. Yeah, I get it. That's okay. You're allowed to feel sad. And we'd hold the child in that place of where they are allowed to feel the sadness. So we are not trying to change that part anymore. We're recognizing that it just wants to be seen and heard. And this is where the magic happens. I mean, that's the part that blows my mind, is not only does it create a tremendous peace inside of us, but that part now starts to follow us. It stops trying to get our attention all the time, because it has been seen, it has been heard, it has been understood. And so it lets go of the overwhelming power of directing us. It doesn't have to direct us anymore. It can't, because now it's a part of us. We've included it. We're not running away from it anymore. And so we start to see, when I find with my clients, with those clients who have been doing this work with me for a while, it's not just a peace that comes, but there's an insight and a wisdom. All of a sudden, that part starts to transform and shows us what's behind it. Maybe what's the first time that it had come out? What's the first time it was triggered? Why is this still so painful? All of a sudden, we have all these memories coming back that explain why that part is feeling this way and thinking this way. And there's a great empathy that is being developed inside of us for that part. And so we start to love it, much like an inner child. And it changes. It loses its power, the negative power, and it turns around and actually starts to support us, which is amazing. I mean, just imagine something you fought before is now coming to your support.
That's amazing. It's so transformative the more you go through the process. And I find it interesting, because over time, as you're going through the work to this path, right? We always talk about living in the light and showing the world your light and letting that out. And that's so important. I think we forget that that darkness is part of the light. Like neither can exist without the other. And it makes sense that they're both part of us. They're both there. We need to acknowledge it. I find it interesting too. Like you get to this point where you know that those other pieces of you are there, the pieces you don't want to look at. I feel like there's another almost like stretch of your path at that point once you've discovered them where you integrate them and let them be part of your authentic self. And that's like maybe like a second part of the journey, but I feel like that's important too. It's recognizing they're there and still being able to be you even though you know they're there. Like it's almost
Right.
for me like a second, another mind pivot maybe, where now you have to like let them be present and be part of your path with you, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you're saying it. I mean, that's how we become more. That's how we become fuller, wider, deeper, because now we can hold the ugly and the beautiful. And in fact, by seeing it fully and allowing it back home, we actually get to be a choice.
I
We
love
actually
that.
get to be a choice as to, you know, do I want to follow the negative part or do I want to follow the light? Now we get to be a choice. We don't get, in fact, this is the paradox. We feel that to be in control, we have to run away. We cannot allow ourselves to think and feel these ways, which does not encourage a confidence, because we actually do know those exist somehow. We're constantly fighting them and it's exhausting. It's so exhausting.
Yeah.
Once we can allow them to be there and hold them at the same time, when we can hold the sadness and the happiness at the same time, we feel way deeper, fuller, and more whole. And we get to be a choice.
I
We're
just
so afraid of being overwhelmed by them, but once we stop and look and see and listen, they're not overwhelming at all. Their size is shrinking. We're getting an empathy for them where there was a fear before.
and I think you hit an important point about the energy, because I think we take so much time and effort and energy to try to control it and run from it. But if we just kind of step back and let it be, they lose power and we're able to focus our time, effort, and energy on the things that really are important to us.
Right.
And so it is, I love that you say we become that choice, because you can decide where do you want your time, effort, and energy to go to something that you are, you're at war with yourself in
Yes.
all ways, really. Or do you want to pursue things that make you feel happy and whole and you're contributing to the benefit of the world? Like it it is a choice. We don't have to stay stuck. It's work to get either way. Like you're doing something no matter what. Which path do you want to take?
Yes, I love how you said that we are fighting with ourselves. I mean, that was me. When I was 23, I was constantly fighting with myself, and it was exhausting, and I could not focus on connecting with others. I couldn't focus on where I wanted to go because I was constantly fighting.
I think it's important, and the fact that you were 23, where it took me some more years before I got to that point. So I mean, I think it's amazing because you really set yourself up. You were accepting of it at a point that's not always easy, because I know at 23 I was not in that mindset. I mean, I guess we all come to it when we're ready. um you were ready at that point
Well,
in your
I
life.
suffered. I suffered greatly. It was very, very painful. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I found myself not knowing who I was. I would constantly tune into the person that was across from me, trying to figure out who do they need me to be? Who do I need to be that this person will accept and adore and love me?
Mm-hmm.
That was my only focus. I wanted to be loved and I wanted to feel worthy, and I spent all my energy trying to prove that I was worthy.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I got the attention I wanted, I never felt truly loved, because in fact, I didn't show who I was. I showed who I thought I needed to be in order to be loved. And so I was in a great amount of pain. First, I tried so hard to please, and at the same time, I didn't even get the love that I really wanted.
How does that play in when you think about relationships and codependency and or dependency?
Mm-hmm. It gets really complicated when we feel at the mercy of someone else's approval.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we don't get to live. We
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
And there's so many of us whose primary focus that is to appeal to someone else, and it messes up our life.
Yeah. I resonate with that on so many levels. Um, I've talked a little bit on the podcast before about, my long abusive marriage, and it took me a long time to get to that point where I was ready to break free from it, even though I did not know what that meant or how.
Mm.
I knew I got to a place where I couldn't do it anymore, but I spent so long uh, trying to please him and thinking I could fix him and trying to be who he wanted me to be. You're absolutely right. It completely messes you up your life, because that one relationship for so long being the focus and all the energy that I spent trying so hard, I lost sight of so many other things going on around me. And
Mm.
the so what ends up happening is there's the pain of that relationship, and then the pain of the relationships that start to go sour on the outside, and it leads you in a place that's you almost then have to like regret, pain, shame for so many other things, and you have to get to a place where you can deal with it, and it's scary to be in that place. But I mean, I'm still not quite there yet, but it's a process. There's layers, and I think that
Yeah.
every time you move into a new level in your life, we're always getting those tests. The universe is always like testing your worth a little bit, kind of looking to see where you're at. And so I feel like there's certain things where I've gotten to a point where that fear is a bit easier to handle,
Mm.
every time there's the change, it shows up in a new way. And again, I feel like it's the universe going, do you still love yourself? Can you love yourself in this position? Like, really? Do you find that you get the tests
Oh
and
God, yes. All the time. And I think I've come to the end, and I'm like, oh my God, how can life be so good? This is amazing. And then there is another layer,
yeah,
and I'm like, oh my God, I haven't even scratched the surface. This was just another layer. Like, how many are there? I think they're endless.
yeah,
I think it's going to be, I mean, thank goodness, or it'd be quite boring, if we got to the end. But yes, I think we're complicated as human beings. Being a human being is complicated.
oh yeah,
It's complicated because we want to connect, and yet there is that distance that is there naturally through our physical boundaries.
yeah,
Where our spirits can go farther, but there is always that we want to be connected, we want to be together, and there is that boundary.
yeah. Oh, I love boundaries.
Complicated.
We'll talk about them for a second. But I think it, you mentioned like this interesting like dance almost, because we want to be connected, but we're afraid to be connected. And then we get over some stuff, and then we want to be connected, but we're afraid to be connected. So we end up almost dancing with ourselves in this war. And then we add other people in, and it is complicated. It's a great word for it. Um, how do you define boundaries, and why are boundaries important? Because it's so part of this process.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, that's a big subject. Where do I start? Boundaries,
It's almost
yes.
a whole other episode just on boundaries.
We could talk all day about
We could
boundaries.
talk about, yes.
Right. Why are boundaries important? Well, here's the thing. I think that the way many of us grow up, boundaries are not okay. I grew up in an environment where I was not allowed to have any boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I couldn't really experience where I started and where I ended. And I also couldn't then feel what it is I wanted. Like I have many clients come to me saying, I don't know what I want.
Mm-hmm.
And of course they don't, because that wasn't encouraged in the way they were growing up. And they blame themselves that they don't know what they want, when really there isn't they haven't been given the chance
Mm-hmm.
to know what they want. The boundaries weren't respected. The boundaries, um, they weren't allowed.
Mm-hmm.
So boundaries are so important in the sense of noticing where do I start and where do I stop and where does the other person start.
Yeah.
I've learned to tune into other people. What do they want? I was so busy with that I couldn't feel where I was. I had to switch my focus to realize what I wanted. And I think maybe that's where the intuition for me started kicking in much, much stronger, once I could feel who I am, what I wanted, and where was I being guided to.
Mm-hmm.
And many times other people will do something that hurts us
Mm-hmm.
in some way, and we need to be able to say stop, especially in abusive relationships that you've mentioned, right? Boundaries are not being respected in an abusive relationship. They are being constantly violated, and then you're being blamed for having put it there in the first place or for wanting it to be there.
Yeah.
So it gets really complicated.
Oh, yeah.
Again,
And the longer it goes on, as soon as you put that boundary up, the harder there's like that harder friction against it because they're like, that's not you. That's not who I want you to be. And this is new and I don't like it. And no, this isn't happening. So it's a hard struggle when you're in that position. And that said, it makes it so important to teach and talk about what that means to have boundaries early.
yes, yes, right. And this is another thing that I've noticed in my coaching, um, that the more my clients get to realize that there's nothing wrong with them at the core,
Mm-hmm.
that they're totally fine, and everything they feel and everything they think is great,
Mm-hmm.
and it has the right to be there, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
And once they start embracing that, that boundary seems to come up all on its own.
Mm-hmm.
It's another powerful thing about, radical self-love, that I've noticed that all of a sudden we don't have to work for the boundaries to be there. They just show up and they're like, whoa, there's a boundary there. I don't know how it got there, but now it's there.
Yep, and that feels good. There's no
It
fear
feels
there. It's
good.
like this is just the way life's going to be and this is what I want and
Yeah.
this is what I want for myself and I know I deserve it. It's a powerful place when you can make that transformation and get to that point, and to be able to celebrate that and the process I think is also really important. Honoring the journey, the good and the bad and the ugly comes with it.
There's embracing again of the positive side too,
Yeah,
right? Of the
yeah.
celebration, the good
Um,
stuff.
can you tell us a little bit about sacred housekeeping?
Oh, sacred housekeeping. It could be secret because it's going on the inside, yes. And it's, you're talking about the art of sacred housekeeping,
Mm-hmm.
yes, which I call, um, that term came for me up when I was trying to describe what it is I do with my clients and in my workshops and the book that I'm writing,
Mm-hmm.
is that I found it really is an art. I mean, it's been 26 years that I've been, deeply involved in the process of personal development, self discovery, and transformation. Um, it really is an art. I still haven't figured it out completely. I'm still learning more every day. It's still going deeper. It's an art to it's an art to build that core or to develop that core that can't be shaken by circumstances. So it's housekeeping on the inside. You know how we take care, our houses are clean, and this is like a focus on the inside of making sure it's balanced, it's developed, it's deepened, it's an art. And so for me, it's the process of coming into wholeness, and coming into a really grounded balance that is palpable, that you can feel. It's not just something you imagine, but it's there. It's in your cells. It's in your being. You can feel it. It's taken me that long to get where I am, and I want to make that way shorter for others. And so I want to be that guide.
So when can we expect the book? Like, are you in the writing process for it still? Are you editing it? Like, how is that coming along?
I'm still writing it. I'm still trying to listen to what it wants to be. I'm just assembling a bunch of things. I'm starting to get more of a feeling for what it wants to be. And I want it to be something that will really serve, like a map, a guide for people in the form of a book that they can use to go on their own process and go through it fast. Because when I started, I didn't know where to look. I didn't even know how to start. I didn't know what was what. I didn't know why I was feeling the way I was feeling.
Yeah.
I didn't know why I was suffering. And I would have loved for someone to say, hey, you're suffering because you've never been given that core that makes you feel like you're worthy, that makes you feel that you have a right to exist and you are lovable and you have something to give to this world. I want that book to be there for those people who have not been given that as a gift when they were children. Yeah. I want that to be a guide for the people who feel there's something wrong with them at the core and they need to fix it and they are suffering and they don't know how. I want it to be like a solid roadmap.
Yeah, I love it. So we will keep our eye out for this book, which is so needed, I think. So I'm so excited to see how this unfolds for you. Where can people find you on social media?
They can find me on Facebook at Phoenix Core Coaching. They can find me on my website at phoenixcore.ca, and they can write to my email, which is phoenix@phoenixcore.ca.
Great. And we'll make sure that all that information is in the show notes, so everybody can contact you.
Yes.
I would love, oh, go ahead.
Well, I want to say, if someone is interested in this process and just wants to chat about the workshops or is interested in receiving coaching, when they go to the website, they will find a place where they can sign up for a free coaching session so
Amazing.
they can see what it's like and see if it's something that they want to do.
Real quick, can you touch on the workshops and like when you have them coming up again, or are they in person? I know with everything going on right now with COVID-19, are they virtual?
They're virtual, yes. They're going to be online. And what I will have is a waiting list of people where they can sign up. And when enough people have expressed interest, I'll throw the workshop together, I'll throw out some dates, and put it on.
Nice. I would encourage everyone to take some time, find her website, and go sign up. This is a process. It's not, I've always said it's not easy, but it's 100% worth it to get started on the process. If you feel like you're here for more, you can't find what that is, you need help, this is a good way to move in that direction. If you're really being called, call Phoenix, because, the radical self-love is so, I love that you're teaching this. So I'm grateful that you're sharing this with everybody and that you're here today. I would love to have you back in a couple of weeks. I know that you also have done a lot of work with narcissistic abuse, and I would love it, if you're up for it, to come back and us have a conversation about that in a couple of weeks.
I'd be so happy to.
Yay! Awesome. So guys, stay tuned for that. Phoenix will come back and we'll have another great conversation. Are there any last minute words that you want to leave listeners with?
Huh. Oh, that's a lovely opportunity. Thank you. Okay, yes. Um, what I want to say is that the most important relationship that we will ever have is the relationship with ourselves.
Mhm.
Because that relationship will determine all the other relationships we have in our life with other human beings and with life itself.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you, Phoenix Gould. Again, give us your website one more time.
It's www.phoenixcore.ca.
Awesome. Great. Everybody make sure you check out her website. Phoenix, again, thank you so much for coming on the Power to Pivot podcast. Guys, remember, you are never stuck, you are never lost, and you're never alone. At any given moment, you can use your power to pivot, make a new choice, and start again. Thanks so much. We'll chat with you on the next episode.
Thanks, Elizabeth.